Welcome to the Modern Day Debate Challenge stage. I have Johnny Truant and Trashio5 up here debating is abortion murder? On the pro-life side, we've got Johnny Truant, and on the pro-choice side, we have Trashio5. Whatever you guys wish to start opening statements, you can go right ahead.
Sure.
Because there's no set times, my role here will be in facilitating, as you say, proper debate etiquette. And so I hold the discernment at any point to mute any one of you in order to get you guys back on track. Whenever you guys are ready, feel free to start.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you so much. I'll just go ahead and start with my opening statement. So like the moderator said, I am defending the pro-life position, answering if abortion is murder. So I'd like to first start by saying, of course, thank you to my opponent, to our moderator, and thank you to the audience. Abortion is a heavy topic on both sides of the aisle, so being willing to participate in this debate one way or another just demands a lot of respect. So big ups for you guys. That being said, getting to the bottom of this debate topic, is abortion murder, while emotionally difficult, can have a clear legal, moral, and natural biological answer. Murder legally can be defined as the premeditated, with malice aforethought, willful destruction of human persons. Reckless disregard for human life can also fall under this definition. But it's important to note briefly that pro-abortionists or choicers are not advocating for murder with malice aforethought. They act on the conviction that what is being aborted is less than a living human being. So I will simply need to prove an embryo or fetus is a living human being. That is the catalyst of this argument. Now, my opponent may challenge the idea that laws and morals are two different ideas, but government legislation often has moral implications. Stealing, murder, and reckless driving are all moral issues. Ecological considerations in legislation also have moral significance. Whether we acknowledge it or not, the law routinely reflects moral judgments. So, accepting this legal definition leaves two options for my opponent. One, either a fetus is not a living human being, which I'll be proving wrong here today, or two, murder is not a moral or ethical wrongdoing. While the latter could hardly be proven, my opponent may try to undermine objective morality, or accuse me of religious bias for objective morality. But this would simply not be addressing the fact that abortion can still be considered murder by definition. My opponent would then just not recognize murder as a serious objective moral offense. Regarding the former, my opponent would somehow have to prove a fetus is indeed not a distinct, individual human life. However, this would be to disregard most scientific findings. Medical pioneer in genetics and discoverer of the extra chromosome that causes Down syndrome, Dr. Jerome Lejeune, has testified publicly in court that, quote, before an embryo, there's a sperm and an egg, which can't be considered pre-embryos because their future development is uncertain. Once fertilized, they form a zygote, which divides into an embryo. It's important because people might mistakenly believe that a pre-embryo lacks the significance of an embryo. In fact, the first cell is more specialized than any cell that develops later in the organism, end quote. Now, before concluding my opening remarks, I'd like to make a final point. Being pro-life can also be interpreted as being pro-nature. Abortion is not just a social or legal issue, it's an intentional disruption of a natural biological process that's already happening. Human reproduction is a natural phenomena, and when it occurs normally, it reflects the same evolutionary forces that have shaped all living species. So, even if someone disagrees with the moral or legal status of the unborn, intentionally ending that process is a deliberate act of destroying developing life, which deserves serious ethical consideration. Thank you.
Thank you for your opening statement. So, Trashy, if you'd like to provide your opening statement, go right ahead.
Yeah. So, firstly, I would agree that murder is the intentional, unjustified killing of a human person. We can all agree on that. The issue that I believe this debate is going to come down to is the point of it being a person. From my perspective as a pro-choicer, I believe that a pre-20 to 24 week old fetus is not a person. Johnny here defined a person as someone who purely is a living human being. However, I would disagree with this definition. For starters, I believe that personhood is not defined by life, but rather the capacity for one to deploy consciousness. And because fetuses do not develop that capacity to deploy consciousness until the 20 to 24 week mark of pregnancy, anything before that should not be counted as a person. Now, the reason we define personhood in this way is because it works the other way as well. Because we're trying to figure out when exactly personhood begins, we can look to when personhood ends. For example, if you had a comatose person who the doctor waved a magic wand over him, and the magic wand told him that this person is never going to wake up again, then I think pretty much everyone here would agree that that person you are allowed to take off of life support because they are no longer able to deploy a conscious experience. And because of that, they are no longer a person and they no longer have the rights of personhood, and we're allowed to let them die. So, if you extend that logic to the conception of people, then it would only follow that people only begin to exist once they develop that capacity for consciousness. And so, um, given all of this, I believe that it is only logically the only logical conclusion is that a fetus prior to the 20 to 24 week mark of pregnancy is not a person, and therefore to kill that fetus is not going to be defined as murder, because murder necessarily requires the killing of a person, right? You don't say that you murdered a dog or a plant, right? It has to be of a person. um, so that's it for me, and I'm able to get into the discussion of things.
All right. Yeah, we can get into open discussion. Um, whoever wishes to start, feel free to.
Yeah, I have a.
Just here to facilitate debate etiquette.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I just had a few questions, and thank you so much for your opening. It was good. I appreciate you taking your time with that. My issue comes down to with the consciousness angle is obviously with a developing child, after a child is born, they don't show the same consciousness, like the same level of consciousness as say a 25-year-old like me. So would you say that you only recognize a certain level of cognition and to identify a human?
So my test for personhood requires two components. Firstly, is that the subject in question is of human genetics. So any fetus would uh, meet that criterion. However, the second one is that it is a human being of any level of consciousness, right? So I don't care about how conscious an individual is. Um, like you could have an individual who you say would be comparable to the level of consciousness of like a pig or a dog or something like that. I would still consider that a person because it is a human being which has some capacity for consciousness.
Yeah, I guess I'm a little confused because so you agree with the human genetics of things, and as far as science would go and genetics would go, it seems very clear that the zygote that I had mentioned is a human in the sense that it meets all those criteria. But when you say that it has a human level of consciousness, since it is a developing human, even though it is an embryo or a fetus, how do we know it doesn't have consciousness? Because there are cases, plenty of cases of babies that do respond to stimuli, that respond to music, for instance, and certain things of that nature.
Sure. So the way that we're able to determine um, whether or not a fetus has consciousness at any given stage of development is actually by looking at uh, um, grown human people, right? So the very basic level of consciousness that we understand, and when I say a very basic level, I truly mean like a very fundamental, like less conscious, as we would say, than most animals that we know. That only begins to develop at 20 to 24 weeks, because that is when it is the thalamus and the prefrontal cortex parts of the brain are not only developed enough, but are communicating with one another within the fetus, which then produces the emergent phenomenon of consciousness. And we know that this is the most basic level thing required for any level of consciousness by looking at adults who are missing those certain components, and that we see when they lack this requirement of having these parts of the brain developed and communicating, we can see are not conscious. So if we can see that a fetus prior to 20 weeks does not meet those requirements neurologically of what's required to um, deploy consciousness, then we know for a fact that there is nothing conscious about this fetus.
Okay, so I think I understand your reasoning with that. My issue, because I have something different here, I don't want to play like a source game, like where is you sourced that 20 weeks?
Sure.
But I have at 43 days, brain waves are detectable, and at 12 weeks.
So brain waves doesn't necessarily mean consciousness.
So
That's a very big distinction.
What would be that distinction? That's like particularly or specifically, what would be like the difference between brain waves and consciousness? Like, or how do those not relate?
For instance, sometimes, like even people that we consider to be brain dead, like people who have been checked, had all the tests done by doctors, and declared brain dead, there are still cases where those people will still have some brain waves going on, but they're still like by all definitions considered brain dead, right? So.
Well, so there is
are not equal to any amount of awareness or cognition or anything of the sort.
But we know that people have come out of long-term comas and that they do actually have memories of what was happening in that coma, and they have a consciousness.
Sure.
So in that sense, you would say that person, even though they are considered legally or medically to be brain dead, they still have a consciousness.
Well, no. Brain dead and comatose are two different states of being.
Okay.
Those people are just like indefinitely unconscious, and their brain is still working. Whereas brain dead people, their brain is ceasing to function.
I see.
Two different states.
Okay, so yeah, I don't know if I finished what I was saying, but I know I said brain waves are detectable at 43 days, but by 12 weeks, all body organs are functional.
Sure. So, like, I understand it, but like the brain is a very, like, you will admit, a very sophisticated, very complex part of the body. Like, you would agree to just that statement alone, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. And so I would say because of this, right, as the science understands, is that only like the like in the same way that a fetus at like, 5 to 10 weeks, you start to see it develop appendages and things that start to look more and more like a human being, um, but they don't look like the fully developed version of those different parts of the body. The same thing happens with the brain. There are like neurons and thing like all of these cells are beginning to develop and multiply, and the brain is starting to develop, but it doesn't meet the threshold of what is considered consciousness until somewhere in the 20 to 24 week range.
So I guess I'm trying to figure out what that threshold is, because originally we were saying that it's when all body organs are functional, but now you're saying, well, that's not what it is.
So it's been defined as I understand it, is when the thalamus and the prefrontal cortex, those specific sections of brain, when they are number one developed enough, and number two properly communicating with one another.
Okay, so
this specific stage of development which is required for any kind of cognitive capacity.
So, but I'm not sure if you're seeing. I forget what you just said, but as regards to like who is setting that boundary for, okay, this is appropriate enough of a connectivity between the brain and the body, because at 12 weeks all body organs are functional. So who's setting this boundary for this is functional enough, this is not functional enough?
Sure. So again, as far as I understand, is that a lot of the methodology of figuring this out is looking at individuals who are grown, who are adults, and seeing individual like people with cases of like brain damage and things of that sort, where they lose either the development of their brain, of either of those two parts in some way, or the connection is severed between the two. We're able to see that even adults who lose that very basic requirement, they are no longer conscious as it's been defined. Um, and so we can apply that to the fetus and say we know that in adults, that when this connection doesn't exist, there is no consciousness to be had. And so, if we know that a fetus doesn't even make that connection to begin with until this certain point in the pregnancy, then we know that anything before that, it's not conscious.
So okay, but if by 12 weeks all the body organs are functional, how do we
Functional,
yeah.
yes. Right?
But how do we know
So
it's not
the
making this
brain can
connection?
be, again, so they can be functional but not necessarily fully developed, or even developed to the point where consciousness emerges.
Right, and I never would be against conceding that, because obviously like a 6-month old's cognitive abilities is going to be different than a 12-month old, because we know that
Right.
there is that potentiality to reach full adult cognition. My point is that if by 12 weeks all body organs are functional, but you're saying that functionality doesn't mean full cognition, that doesn't mean that there is no cognition.
Well, no. So again, like when I say the 20 to 24 week mark, when that specific brain connection is made, that is again like a very very basic level of what we understand to be consciousness. Um, like that is us doing all of the groundwork of saying we're going to give you everything that we possibly can. This is like the bare minimum, the very beginning of
Mm.
when anything conscious begins.
Okay.
This is the limit of it. Anything before that is purely nothing. That is our understanding.
So let's just go with that idea. I don't necessarily agree, but let's just say that is the case. When you say that anything before that is nothing, then you would say that's strictly because of the body, like why is that? Like, because it could be the case that also medical science, because like, so say 4 years ago a 20-week-year-old baby couldn't be delivered, but I think last year they delivered a 20-week-year-old 20-month-year-old baby, and it was like the newest. The earliest that a baby had ever been delivered, and it was accomplished because of modern medicine. So going with that idea, going with that definition, like, okay, 20 weeks, they don't have, I guess, whoever's setting the appropriate cognition to be recognized as a human. Is it possible that we're wrong, or that there could be evidence that shows actually earlier there is human cognition?
Yeah, so I will absolutely say that if as science develops, that we find out we have new evidence showing that there is some level of capacity for consciousness, which occurs before the 20-week mark, I would absolutely concede that and say that would be the new line whenever that is determined to be. I would say I'd put the line there, and move with the science. Absolutely.
Okay, so you would rather set the line scientifically and have no moral ties to it.
Yeah, the moral ties are to consciousness, and that is only determined by the science.
Okay, so I'm a little confused by that. So consciousness is only can only be determined by science.
Um, well, that's a bit of a tricky question because consciousness is a really tough thing.
Mhm.
Um, to objectively determine because it is inherently a subjective experience. Like I can't prove that you're conscious or that anyone else in the chat is conscious, right? It is a purely subjective experience, and so we're only able to really use uh, things that lead us to believe that there's consciousness there, like correlative things.
So you see the problem then with that is that you said, well, consciousness is subjective. So if we go with that,
that doesn't mean that we don't know what correlates with it.
That's not necessarily what I'm saying, though, is that if we're saying, okay, well, this is consciousness determines if this person should be alive or not, then it could be that person determining what is the line is completely subjective.
Not necessarily, because it's using objective means, right? So, for example, if you saw a skeleton, right, like a real skeleton, would you say that thing is conscious in any way?
That would be a hard one because I just wouldn't even. I guess not, because it doesn't have a brain, right?
Right, exactly. Like even if you saw like a fully formed human person who like was alive a minute ago, and then you saw their head completely explode, you'd probably be pretty sure to say that person is no longer conscious.
Would you say that an embryo doesn't have the potentiality to gain consciousness though? Because like a skeleton doesn't have the potentiality to gain consciousness because it's a skeleton.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I don't believe that when it comes to a fetus, which has not reached the threshold of personhood yet, potentiality means absolutely nothing. You cannot attribute the value of what something is going to be in the future to what it currently is.
Why is that?
Yeah, so I usually use an analogy with this. So, for example, if your house today was currently the color blue, right? But you knew for a fact that you hired some guys that are going to come out tomorrow, and at some point tomorrow, they're going to completely redo your house and paint the entire thing red, right? So you know all of this, and during your day, you have someone who comes to you and says, "Hey, we're giving away $500 to everybody who has a red house." And you, knowing that your house is going to be red tomorrow, you say, "Oh yeah, that's me. I have a red house," right? And so you ask to be paid the $500. But they want to do their due diligence, right? Just to make sure that they're not getting scammed out of their $500. So they go and check your house the day of, right? And if they go and check, they're going to see that your house is blue. So you're not getting the $500. So this is all just to say that you cannot ascribe the value of what something is going to be in the future to what it currently is.
Yeah, and I get that from your example and from a controlled environment, but like when I was talking about with my opening statement with the ecological concerns, when it comes to human development, evolution, what is naturally occurring, these are things that are happening by chance and random selection. It's not like the difference of hiring somebody to color or to paint my house. So when we know repeatedly that human development is an evolutionary, natural, biological cause, and we know it's going to happen in this particular way, we can detect these things because you recognize that scientifically we can detect consciousness and we can detect these things. It's a little different than a house that's going to be painted or scheduled to be painted.
I don't think so, right? Because you're talking about determining the value of a thing in its current state. And in its current state, it is not conscious. It has as much awareness and understanding of the world around it as a rock does, right? And like
does a rock move though?
Right, it doesn't matter.
I just don't think you can compare
personhood.
Well, I would maybe agree with that, but I just don't think comparing a rock with an embryo would be like the proper comparison because we know that
that's the perfect comparison.
Okay, yeah, I get your point with the consciousness. Like, sure, maybe a rock doesn't have consciousness, but your idea that a baby, an embryo or a fetus doesn't have consciousness until this point doesn't really seem that doesn't really seem to help that point because you're comparing two unlike things.
Okay, can you give me an example of another instance in life where you use this same kind of logic of using the future value of a thing in order to determine how you act with its current value?
Yeah, I mean, any kind of evolutionary understanding of a speciation and different species that have come about. I mean, that's kind of how we conduct medical science, isn't it?
I'm not really sure what you mean.
So the idea with the house, I get what you're saying in the sense of like to me it sounds more like you're counting your eggs before you have them, right? Or you're counting what is the saying, like you're counting eggs in the basket before they hatched or something like that.
Right, before they hatch, yeah.
Yeah, and and maybe that's actually a better example of what I have, but it's not that way for the house, where because you see with the house situation, it's already been put into motion by somebody who is conscious, but through nature. That's where evolutionary development of humans and of different animals, different species happens. So my point is that I'm saying that I just don't think those two are comparable.
Well, I would disagree, right? Like I think it's like even if I change the analogy to say that like you didn't even hire anyone to come and paint your house, right? Like you know for a fact that the weather today is going to rain red rain and it's going to dye your house red, right? If we go by that example, it still doesn't change the fact that you're not getting the $500 for a red house that isn't red.
Yeah, my problem would be is that repeatable and how often does that happen, right? Because if we're talking
It
science,
doesn't. It's not.
yeah.
It's not. It doesn't need to be analogous in that sense. I'm only using the analogy to show that you cannot use the future value of a thing to determine how you treat it currently.
Why not? Because that, like I said,
Because
that's the
that
idea
isn't what
of
it is.
well, so how do you think we conduct like medical science and research, right? We work on mouse embryos, we work on different orangutan embryos. We do things based off of their potentiality of what these animals are going to become, because we know, hey, this is the process of how human embryos develop, and we know that obviously through evolution and natural selection
None of
that.
that has to do with how we value those things.
Well, sure, but value is a little bit different than the science of it, right? So when you say value, what exactly do you mean?
I'm saying that
Yeah.
we like in this instance we value personhood, right? Like that has a lot of things that comes with it. You know, your different rights and your liberties and things.
So yeah, so
I understand it.
like I asked earlier, you said that you don't have any value over like less consciousness than more consciousness, because obviously a 6-month-old isn't going to have the same consciousness as an adult. But that sounds like that's what you're saying, is that the value that we value certain aspects of this consciousness over here, but not certain aspects of this consciousness over here.
Well, no. So the thing is that it's not a degree of consciousness. It's a yes or no of consciousness. It is a binary.
Right. But that's what I'm saying, is that the consciousness is there, the consciousness that we know that an embryo will develop because of repeatable scientific information.
Will develop. It's not there right now. It will develop. It doesn't have it. Right? Another example, right? If you if you're like just walking down Walmart and you see a really nice shirt in the racks and you're like, man, that's a really nice shirt. I want to buy that shirt. But you know that you don't get your paycheck until tomorrow. You can't buy that shirt.
Right.
have the money.
But what is the evidence that you will have that money to buy that shirt? That's my point, is that I'm not trying to do it. I'm not trying to say like, okay, well, the value comes from the fact that I think it's going to develop to become a human, but the fact that we know scientifically what the evidence shows that an embryo will develop to become a human and that it does have consciousness.
Right, I agree, but when you're determining how you treat that thing currently, right? Like in the example of an abortion, if you kill a fetus prior to 20 weeks, then there's nothing being harmed there. There's no entity which is experiencing any pain, any discomfort, anything. Again, it is experiencing the world and anything you do to it as much as a rock does, right? So, yes, in the future, it would start to feel things and experience. And at that point, I would obviously say, don't kill that thing. But right now, when we do kill the fetus, there's nothing being experienced by it, there's nothing being harmed.
Well, except the fully functioning organs, all body organs at 12 weeks. Objectively, that is being harmed, regardless of if you think it's alive or not.
Sure. Right, it might be living. I agree, it's a living human, but it's not a person.
So then you would concede that it's murder then?
Persons. No, because it's not a person. Murder requires the killing of a person.
So, hold on, let me pull up that definition I had one more time, because, what was I say? Abortion, so under that category of it being murder being legally defined as premeditated with malice, aforethought, willful destruction of human persons, it also counts as reckless disregard of human life. So you're saying that it does have all the features of a human. It looks like a human. It just isn't a life.
I would probably then just disagree with that definition of murder, with the that second part of it, with the where it refers to human life. I would say that's a bad definition, because if that were the case, right, like if I were to cut my arm off and continue to give it a blood supply, right, we wouldn't say that that's a person. If someone goes and cuts it open and dissects it, totally, like, just shoves it in a meat grinder, I don't care, right? We wouldn't define that as murder. That's still living human, but obviously that's not murder.
I don't know if I would say the arm is living though. So that's kind of what I'm.
Sure it is. No. I'm saying, like, you cut it off, you continue to give it blood supply from some other means, right? Just like at a blood bank.
But it can't move.
It's still alive. It's still alive.
Okay, so by what criteria then is it still alive?
It's
like, what differentiates that from a rock?
That's a really good question. So
yeah, I'd like to know. Well, because you're saying it's alive. So, yeah.
Well, yeah. So it's alive in the sense of, like, biologically, it's still is like functioning in the sense of it's not decaying. It still has energy being put into it. It's still being
Yeah, it sounds like an embryo. That sounds like an embryo. So you would count that as a life.
Agreed, right?
Okay.
But if I were to put that arm in a meat grinder, you wouldn't call that murder, would you?
Well, I wouldn't call it murder, but I also wouldn't agree that the arm meets those criteria. I wouldn't say the arm and the embryo is the exact same. See, what I'm trying to explain to you is that you kind of seem all over the place as far as like what you're defining as a life and having consciousness. So I'm just confused. Like, I'm just trying to kind of pin you down. Like, where?
What do I need to clarify?
Quite a few things. So, like, the idea is that so before you said that, well, once all the body parts are developed, because you said there's certain parts in the brains that if they don't cross wires, if they're not meeting, then the consciousness doesn't exist. Okay, I'm fine with that, but you say that happens at 20 weeks. Well, at first you were saying that happens when all the body parts are fully developed at 20 weeks.
No, I never. I want to make it very clear. I never said anything about all of the body parts being developed or anything like that. Specifically, the brain.
Okay, so I apologize. I'm not trying to misquote you here, but
No worries.
because of that, obviously I have from Dr. Jerome Lejeune that at 12 weeks, all the body parts are developed and fully functioning. So my question is, how do you get from that 20? So okay, how do you get to that 20-week point where it's like this is enough consciousness? This is enough of a criterion to meet. Like I can't seem to pin that down.
Yeah. So again, just because we would define the brain at 12 weeks to be fully functioning, right? That doesn't necessarily mean that it's conscious, right? Like for example, like like any animal, right? Even when it's fully developed as an adult, we would say has a functioning brain, but we wouldn't say has a conscious brain, right?
So do you think
Way.
yeah.
Go ahead.
So I kind of need you to break down a little bit more specifically about the idea of like the consciousness, because there's certain areas we could get to and just be like, well, this isn't consciousness because I said so. I don't, like Hitler said Jews don't have the same human
Sure.
the human meetings or the same human attributes as like a white Aryan person. So it's one of those things where it's like, okay, sure, a scientist says this over here, but is that really what the evidence shows?
Yes. The answer is yes. That is what the evidence shows.
Right, but I have contradictory evidence to that. So my point is that
No, not at all. Your evidence is not contradictory. It's measuring a different thing.
So what's the criterion for a consciousness?
So again, it's a difficult to define thing. I believe that when we look at that very, very basic level, it has to do with some level of awareness of reacting to external stimuli. Um, and
So I mean, a 20-week-old baby does. I mean, like before 20 weeks, a baby does this. It reacts to stimuli. It has all those things. It's at least so far, and I know that you agree that it's a difficult thing to define, and I agree with that too. I think it is difficult, but I think that speaks more to the pro-life position, because if it's difficult, it's like, okay, well, why are we killing it if we're not 100% sure it doesn't have consciousness?
Again, so we know this because we can look at adult people who do not meet these criteria, and we can see that even as adults, they don't meet any of the criteria for consciousness. Someone who lacks the entirety of their prefrontal cortex, right? They're not conscious anymore. They're practically brain dead.
So like a vegetable, but we're not eliminating vegetables. There's tons of people who are vegetabilized or have been vegetabilized by car accidents, things like that, but we're not.
That's a different form. I'm talking specifically the level of brain damage where they no longer meet the criteria of having both of those parts of the brain, and secondly having them connected, communicating with one another.
Yeah, so there's a case of a girl who's about 22 years old. I can't remember if it's Dr. Carl Kruger that worked with her or what it was, but she was born without half of her brain. Is she not a human?
I mean, considering she made it to 22 and she was able to work with the doctor, like, if you could give me her name, like.
Yeah, I'd have to look up the case.
If I were to, like, look at her and see that she's able to, do all of the things that we would say constitutes any level of consciousness, then I would say, yeah, she is a person. Right. So, like, for example, like, I'll bite a bullet for you.
Yeah.
Are you aware of the Baby Jax case?
I'm not.
Okay, so Baby Jax was a child born last decade. He lived to be 5 years old. Um, he was born with a very severe case of hydroencephaly, and pretty much the vast majority, like 80% of his head, was purely filled with water. He only had like fragmentary remnants of a brain stem. Um, and the parents, they knew this before he was ever born. They knew that he was going to live this kind of life. They because they were religious and had this same sort of position, they chose to give birth to him anyway and raise him as best they could. Again, he lived to 5 years old, but from everything that we understand from all of the footage and everything that we have of watching him, I would say 100% that Baby Jax was not necessarily a person. And I would say that these parents, at any time, even after he was born, would have been okay to um, relinquish him of his life.
Okay, I can understand based off of the criterion that he doesn't have a prefrontal lobe, that he's not in that sense human. But anybody that's lacking that, right? Because there is an operation where you can split the brain in half for people that have chronic migraines, and they do just fine. But if they're missing that prefrontal cortex, then they're not human, in your opinion.
Right, and thankfully that procedure of splitting the brain in half doesn't sever that connection at all.
Okay. I'm not sure if that's true, but we'll go with that. But
I promise you it is.
okay, so let's just say the prefrontal cortex is the criterion. So at 12 weeks, the embryo, the fetus has that.
Yeah, so it might have it in the sense that it, like, you can like see in a brain scan that it has a bundle of like neuron cells that would be what we would call.
Yeah, so that's not what I'm saying though. I'm saying all body organs are functional. That is what.
Again, but
Yeah.
we already agree that just because they're functioning doesn't mean that they've met the criteria.
Right, but I'm trying to meet your criterion, which is a prefrontal cortex. So it has that.
Yes. So specifically, again, I'll make it very clear. It requires a thalamus, which is developed to a certain point. It requires a prefrontal cortex, which is developed to a certain point. And finally, it requires that the both of these be connected to one another and properly communicating with one another.
Yeah. So my claim is that
it might have the thalamus, it might have the prefrontal cortex, they might exist and be functioning, quote unquote, but that doesn't mean that they are connected and communicating properly to one another, or that they are actually developed to the point where consciousness emerges.
Yeah, but so how do you how do you know that? Because I'm for a fact
that's what the science has shown.
What science?
Okay, so now we get into the asking for studies. Like I can look for a study that talks about this.
That's fine. I mean, because I more so want to know, so who I'm quoting is Dr. Jerome Lejeune, who is recognizing that, at 43 days, the brain waves are detectable, and at 12 weeks, all body organs are functional. And as far as I understand, that's correct. It may even be sooner now, actually, but because this is pretty old from what I'm quoting. But as far as I understand, that is correct. So that's what I'm trying to figure out here, is that it seems like this does meet your criterion, but that there's some kind of scientific disconnect where either you don't agree with the science I'm giving, or you're not actually communicating what the science shows.
Again, I understand that your study states that the parts of the body are functioning, but that doesn't mean that they're developed to the point where it means something, right? Like they might have a heart, but you couldn't use that heart to pump the blood in a full-grown man, obviously.
Well, no, you can do that with a 6-month-year-old, but if that's a criteria, then that's what I'm saying is that this can be applied to people who are already outside of the womb. So you're kind of setting imaginary lines.
You are simply stating that this means it meets the criteria, but you don't necessarily have the evidence for that.
Well, what do you mean? I just quoted the Dr.
Again,
Jerome
so
Lejeune.
Just because they are functional does not mean that they are developed enough to the point where consciousness emerges. So like,
yeah, but what are you basing the quote unquote developed enough on? Like, I feel like we're stuck on this point where it's like
of what the scientific consensus has given.
Right. So the scientific I mean, do you just disagree with the idea that all body parts are fully functional at 12 weeks?
No, I'll agree with that, right? So like, we can say that at 12 weeks, the various parts of the brain are considered functional in a fetus at 12 weeks, right? But then say that it requires a bit more development, which doesn't meet the threshold until 20 to 24 weeks for when consciousness emerges. Just because it's functioning doesn't mean it's to the point of development for consciousness.
Right, but what is the threshold?
Again, it is that thalamus, prefrontal cortex, development, and connection.
Right, it has all that by 12 weeks.
No.
Okay, so what is show me a study then where there is no connection at 12 weeks after all the body parts are fully formed. Because if it's my understanding is that if the body parts are fully formed, that means they're fully formed, fully connected. There's not disconnects waiting to happen.
So a 12-week fetus is as conscious and has as much awareness as a 25-year-old?
Well, no, but we already established that. That's why I'm saying, do you value? Right. That's why I asked you before, and you said
it is a level of development. It's not the same level of development.
So I asked you earlier, and you said you disagreed. So you value levels of cognition more than others?
No. Oh my God. I value. It's not levels of cognition. It's consciousness. The capacity to deploy consciousness. If a human being has the capacity to deploy consciousness of any kind, then that's fine. But what I'm saying is that while the fetus might have a functional brain, it doesn't mean that it's a brain that is able to produce consciousness.
Do you have an example of a brain that's fully functional that can't produce consciousness?
A dog.
I wouldn't say a dog doesn't have consciousness. And if that's the case, is it okay to kill dogs? Like just abort dogs, or not even abort, just kill them?
It's not called murder.
I didn't say murder. I said kill.
Right. Again, I agree that we're killing a fetus. The disagreement here is on murder.
Right, but that's why I'm asking you: is it okay to just kill dogs and just because they don't have your level of requirement of cognition?
Again, that doesn't matter. We're talking about the definition of murder.
Well, I'm using your example. We can move off of that topic.
The topic of the debate is abortion murder, not is it killing?
Yeah. Well, so my point is that I'm saying it is murder because you can't actually set a boundary for what is considered an ethical killing of the fetus or the embryo, because you're saying cognition, but you can't act every time you put cognition plus like with this specific requirement, it can be met by any other species or any other human outside of the womb. So you're saying that it's okay to kill. Yeah. Okay. Go ahead.
So let me ask you this. When do you believe personhood begins?
At conception.
Okay, when do you believe it ends?
Personhood ends? I guess it would depend on what you mean by like you know.
Does someone no longer have like the required right to life or any other rights?
I think you always have a right to life regardless. I don't think there's any kind of human being that would meet.
Someone stop being a person?
I think there are rare occasions, like say with Adolf Hitler, where you could say he was not acting as a human. He obviously was not your average human being, right? And so it would be justified to kill him. However, I still wouldn't say he all of a sudden just loses his right to life. Like a right to life is kind of a major thing. Like that's not really for somebody to choose.
Right, like we don't. So like we're not allowed to go and like take any person who's living, walking around, and without asking them or anything, just go and put them in the ground and have a funeral for them, right?
Sure.
So there's something that happens between when someone's walking around, living their life, and when we put them in the ground, where we're now allowed to violate their autonomy in that way. And I would say that's death is when that happens. So,
but like you can't. There are a lot.
Death. Someone stops being a person happens.
So the end of life, I would say, is different than the end of personhood, right? Because it's not like you can just rob graves and that's totally like fine. Like that you can just dig up dead bodies and do whatever you want with it. Okay, but what I'm saying is that personhood. So like, for example, Kobe Bryant. Okay, do you know who Kobe Bryant is?
Yeah.
Okay, did Kobe Bryant lose his personhood when he died? Or is he still Kobe Bryant and well known?
He's still, but like that person doesn't exist anymore.
Okay, so his body doesn't exist anymore, but that person still exists. His personhood is more than just a body.
So you don't think personhood ever ends?
I'm not necessarily saying that personhood ever ends, but I'm saying that there are cases in which personhood can extend past a person's life. It's not just a matter of, is this body actively alive and working?
On?
Well, like my example, I'm just saying that like with Kobe Bryant, it's not like Kobe Bryant is no longer Kobe Bryant. Like he's still that person.
What is your test?
What do you mean?
Like if I were to just give you a random person who died some random amount of time ago, what would your test be to say whether that is still a person or not?
I'd probably show up to the funeral and see if anybody has any good words to say about him. Because if they do, then I would say that that's...
so they have to say good words about a person for...
No, they can say bad words, but it's still recognizing that that is a person or was a person. And that that person has personhood.
Purely an idea of someone's conception of like that being a person.
That may not be the proper definition, but I would say it extends past the idea of biological life. Like, so it's not just that as soon as life ends, as soon as your body is done, that your personhood is completely gone, right? Because you still have...
So
yeah.
If a woman gets pregnant, never for an instant considers the fetus to be a person in any way, doesn't speak of it as though it is, purely talks about it as like an it, like calls it a parasite, that kind of thing, all the way up until it's aborted, then we're cool.
No, so that's my point though, is that there's a difference between personhood and when something is alive, right? So just because...
Right, exactly. And we just agreed that in that scenario, that fetus is never once considered a person as you've defined it. No one speaks of it as a person. No one has any words to say about it. It's not given a name, anything. It doesn't even experience the world, right? It doesn't even like establish its own like will to live, right? By your definition, that is not a person.
Well, no. So I never said that. I said that person doesn't lose their personhood. I never said that it's not a person by definition. I'm strictly... we're talking about two different points here because I was strictly regarding your question.
Personhood by the biological conception of new genetic material, but they lose their personhood whenever people stop talking about them.
Well, no, because I would...
How is that consistent?
So I didn't say that it was the fact that just biological... what I was saying was that they're two separate things, right?
Conception.
So I said that life starts at conception. I didn't say personhood.
I asked you, when does personhood begin?
Okay. Well, then I apologize. I must have misunderstood that. What I meant was personhood, because I can name my child before we even have sex, before I have sex with my wife. Like we can think of a child, we can think of how that we want that child to be, and that it's not like that child doesn't ever exist, right? It has the potential. That personhood has a potentiality to develop into a child. My point is separating the two is that potential life and potential personhood are two separate things. Because something could objectively be.
If a couple, let's say, had like they are really, really, really wanting a kid. They already have a name for if it's a boy, if it's a girl. They're already picturing what they're gonna look like, right? And they have sex, right? If they don't conceive, right? In that specific instance of sex, would you say that like they murdered the kid by not being able to properly put sperm into egg? Because that's a person in all accounts as you've described it, but then
so that would be the difference between
by not having sex properly, or however you want to put it, they weren't able to properly conceive that child. Then they stopped that child from coming into being.
Again, I don't see how that would degrade the personhood or the potential personhood. It just means that sperm and that egg didn't connect at that time, but that doesn't mean the person doesn't.
What do you mean potential personhood?
Well, so like I said, I think you're still conflating when life starts and when personhood starts, but I'm trying to separate them as two separate things, right? Because as I showed, personhood can extend past or start before conception even happens.
Right, you can start. So what do you mean potential personhood? What does that mean?
Well, it's the same because, like I said, you can plan what you want your kid to be like. You can plan.
Right, but you would just call that personhood. So potential personhood doesn't really exist.
Maybe that's not the proper term for it, but that's not necessary. I mean, I guess if you want to regard it as just personhood
from start to finish.
My point is that I'm trying to separate personhood from life.
Okay. Would you say that like He-Man, for instance, right? Like, it's a very well-known character. People talk about him. He's got his show and his movies and things, right? That would constitute personhood under your definition. So is He-Man a person who is endowed with all the rights of life and liberty and happiness and all that?
Well, he's not alive, so it's not necessarily. Sure, you can say he's a person.
See, I think this is just a really silly way to define person. Like I'm kind of proving the absurdity of it.
Well, I'm just not really sure. I'm not really sure of your point. What I'm trying to say is that we're talking about personhood, or are we talking about life when life begins?
I believe personhood is the point that matters here when it comes to abortion.
Okay, does that matter in this? So you're saying that personhood is what determines if it's murder or not?
Correct.
Okay, so I guess by your criteria, I'm really confused by that because, like I said, it's not like you ever really lose personhood necessarily.
I think you do, absolutely.
Right, so you're saying that it's connected. You're saying you do because it's connected to biological life and living, but that's what I'm saying is that what is that connection? Because I obviously showed, like with Kobe Bryant, his personhood lives on even though he's dead completely.
Again, like, when you think of a person, what does that mean for a thing to be a person?
It's a good question. To be a person. Well, I do think, yeah.
In an easier way, like, what is the difference between a thing that is a person and a thing that is not a person? What's the difference there?
Are you saying like human persons, or are you saying that somebody like with a personality?
Just personhood.
I don't know. I don't know if I could define that properly off the top of my head. I wouldn't say that it's completely linked to biological life or what is considered life, because like your He-Man example, you can have a person who is not necessarily a human or living person.
Okay, so actually, I have a perfect question. So we agree, well, we don't, but for the sake of the point I'm making, we'll agree that personhood is when some being is thought of in some way, like is manifested, even if it's purely within the minds of people, through talking about it, giving it a personality, a name, these sorts of things. That constitutes the personhood of a being, right? So
I'll agree with that for now. Yeah.
sure. Well, is that mischaracterizing how you've put it? Because you can clarify.
I don't know what the proper like definition would be for like personhood, or what defines a person. I honestly, I think that's kind of a difficult question that we're still trying to figure out. It's same with like figuring out like what is a human.
Well, hold on. So we need to step back for a second, right? I very clearly defined what constitutes personhood or the lack thereof. If you don't have any kind of definition for that, then to anyone listening in the audience, they should just default to my position because I'm at least giving them something.
Yeah, but you see, the problem is that you're completely forgetting the fact that I was trying to differentiate personhood from life. So they can think a person only meets this certain. Well, can I finish real quick?
Tell me what.
Can I finish real quick?
Is.
Can I finish real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
My point is that it's a moot point. Like, it doesn't matter, because I can make any definition up that I want. That doesn't change the objectivity of when life begins.
Sure, but
so I can grant you any definition you would like, but that doesn't change the fact that abortion could. That was the whole point of my opening statement, is that you can talk down on what is life, what is considered life. You can change the definition, but it could still be considered objectively murder.
It's a living human being. A fetus is a living human being.
Okay, well then it meets then they should choose.
100%.
Then they should be pro-life, because then that is murder then.
But again, when you read your definition, it specifically stated the unjustified and like pre-thought killing of a person.
Yeah. So
that was your definition.
Yes. So that's part of it. But my other part that I was saying, that it's also known as reckless disregard for human life.
Again, so then I would say, right, if I accidentally throw that arm that's being kept alive into a meat grinder, if I do that accidentally, then I should be charged with murder, right?
But that's what I don't agree with, is what is the criterion for that arm being alive?
It's living tissue.
Okay, so living tissue is your criterion for what is considered murder. So I could do it. I could, I don't even.
No, that's what you have defined when you say a human life, right? That's what you're referring to, is just any kind of living human tissue that exists. Because at conception, that's all there is. It's a clump of cells.
So I'm not indicating
there's
that
no functionality to it. There's nothing. It is purely just a clump of cells at the very beginning. But you still call that.
So what I would disagree. What I would disagree is with the functionality portion of it, because there are functions. It's just that you don't agree that those functions are meet the criteria or are enough to be considered alive, because you're just a clump of cells.
So
you're just a clump of cells. So can we murder you? Can I murder you?
If a child is conceived, right? Sperm meets egg, and then after it goes through the entire process of conception, and it's now a clump of like 5 cells, right?
It's quite a bit. It's 46 genes. 13 from your mom, 13 from your father.
That doesn't necessarily.
Or sorry, 23. I meant.
Right, all of those can be in one cell. I don't know if you knew that. but
Well, sure,
right?
but I'm just saying that.
A clump of like a dozen cells, right? If we pause time for a second, right, and this is what we have, what is the functionality of that clump of cells?
Well, do you think those clumps of cells just sit there and don't do anything?
Well, I agree they multiply, but if we
Yeah,
if we
and they also.
stop, like,
Yeah.
what is their function right there? What can they do?
Yeah, give me, where is it? Oh, here we go. Yeah, so at conception, there are a number of gene pieces in the fertilized cell that contribute to making antibodies. So they make antibodies to protect themselves. The genes are arranged into clusters, like cluster 1 and cluster 2 and so forth. In humans, there are approximately 250 gene segments in cluster 1. A ways down the DNA from cluster 1 are 10 gene segments that form cluster 2. So they create antibodies. They don't want to die naturally.
Sure, that's fine. Neither do plants or bugs.
Right? Would you say they're not alive?
No, I would say they're alive. I'd say they're not people.
No, I never said that, but you would say they're alive, right?
Correct.
Okay, so what's the difference between an embryo?
Again, like, what is your definition of life, I guess? Because I feel like that's a crossroads we have, which is strange.
My definition of life. I don't know if I could define necessarily what life is, but that's not necessarily. Well, I'm just.
You can't even. You're using life and personhood and all of these.
Well, can I
You
explain?
don't even know what these are.
So my point is that it's not that I don't understand what life is, but to try and conceptualize it, I think is kind of a tricky task, and it's not actually going to stop. It's not going to stop the fact that that conception is when life begins.
Wait,
But-
what begins? You don't even know what begins. You don't have a definition for it.
Well, I can just look up the definition. Let's see. Life definition. But I mean, if this is my pitfall, is that I don't have a definition for life, then your pitfall is that you don't have a definition for what is cognition or consciousness.
I've already given you some things which are tested, which are correlative to what we understand to be consciousness.
Like what? Like other human. You said other human. Okay, so like fetuses and embryos meet that sensory awareness. So that's what you've been saying, but embryos meet that criterion.
For 20 weeks.
But see, my point is that if I can't define what is life, that's not the problem. The problem is that when does it actually begin? What does the science show? Because I can sit here and say, well, life is this, but that's also just my opinion. That doesn't actually change when life is. But if you want the definition,
right. Which is why I go to the scientific definitions.
I mean, there's so many different definitions for life. There is the condition that distinguishes animals. Yeah. I mean, the condition that distinguishes animals and plants from inorganic matter, including the capacity for growth, reproduction, functional activity, and continual change preceding death. Would you agree to that?
Sure. Probably.
Okay, so how does an embryo not meet that definition?
Again, I agree it's alive.
Well, then it's murder.
I agree to this.
It's murder to stop it.
No, because your definition did not say killing human life. It said killing human persons.
Persons and reckless endangerment of human life.
Again, and then I would say I disagree with that definition because again, that would entail that if I accidentally drop an arm that still has blood supply to it into a wood chipper, then that would constitute me being charged with murder. Okay,
so please tell me what function an embryo does not have or has less of that a severed arm has.
What, you think that a severed arm isn't functioning whatsoever?
I never said that. I just said what is what. So if you can get rid of a severed arm and that is considered a life, then is it the exact same as an embryo? Because I don't agree with that.
I would say on that basis of being alive but not a person, yeah, they are equal in that way.
Okay, so how? So like an embryo can move, a severed arm can't move without assistance.
Of course it can. Of course it can.
How?
Wait, like it literally, like all of the biological components are all still there and working, right? If you were to literally just like
Not if it's
shock
severed.
it, right? Uh, yes, it is. All the cells are still working properly.
Right. So if I were to leave the arm,
If you keep a blood supply to it, it still is functioning. Like, it's not going to decay. It is alive. Those cells aren't going to die.
I don't think that's true.
What?
If you keep pumping blood into the arm, it's just not going to decay.
Correct. Yeah, it is going to stay alive. All the cells are going to keep.
I mean, I would definitely want to see a study for that, but I think we're getting a little off the topic here. I definitely would love to see a study. I just don't think that's comparable to an embryo. Like, do you see what I'm saying? Like, I don't think a severed arm would be comparable. And then you're saying, plus you have to have all these things hooked up to it to continue to keep its state, which I don't even think is true. But
no, I'm sorry, I can't move on from this.
Okay.
You truly believe that if you kept a severed body part connected to a blood supply where it's getting all the proper oxygen and nutrients that it normally would get with that blood supply, you think it's still going to like decay and die?
We're hooked to a constant blood supply and we're decaying and dying as we speak.
No, we're not. What?
What is confusing about that?
I'm sorry. Do you see people walking around during the day where they have like their skin falling off and they smell really bad and they obviously like they're decaying? Do you see that happening? No.
Okay, are we actively dying? Are we actively aging?
Aging and dying are not the same thing.
So what's the outcome of aging if it's not dying?
Eventually is
okay.
death, right? But those are
okay.
They are not one and the same. Are you kidding me?
Well, I'm glad you recognize that this isn't one and the same, but somehow an arm and an embryo is one and the same.
Means nothing. But no, like, I need you to understand that, like, what is stopping you right now biologically from your cells dying and not reproducing and you decaying into dust? What stops that?
Well, nothing stops it indefinitely, but the idea is that you could probably slow it through different methods like exercise, things like that.
Well, no, what do those do? What in your body is keeping your cells alive?
I don't know if anything's like necessary. I guess they just keep.
It's your circulatory, your heart and your blood and your vein. So your veins in your blood is transporting all sorts of nutrients and oxygen and all of these different things to all the different parts of your body, right? That's what keeps your cells alive and continuing to reproduce.
Well, it's not just the blood, because you said that it's transferring a bunch of nutrients and a bunch of oxygen and other things as well.
It's done through the blood. That's how it's transferred in the body. Is through blood.
Okay, sure.
That's why your circulatory looks the way it does, where you have all these different veins that get teeny tiny and everything.
So if an embryo or a fetus has a circulatory system, then it's good.
It's alive. I agree.
Okay.
A fetus is alive, but not a person.
Okay, so like I said in my opening statement, you can disagree on what is a person, or you can even disagree on what is alive, but that does not change objectively. It could still be considered murder because it meets the criteria of what is murder legalistically.
Okay.
So that's kind of my point. Is
no, murder requires the killing of a person.
It requires, like I said, if you don't want to agree with my definition, we can go off another definition, but it's human persons and willful destruction or willful or reckless endangerment of human life as well.
Again, so, okay, under this definition, then we would say that if we had a brain dead patient who, by all other means, like their body is alive, it's still functioning, everything is functioning except the brain. If you were to kill that person and stop the functioning of the rest of the body, that would be murder under this definition. Do you think someone should be charged with murder for discontinuing the life of the rest of a person's body when they're already brain dead?
So I'm sorry, you might have to repeat that one more time. So you said that a person who's brain dead in the hospital.
So yeah, so when someone is brain dead, right, their brain is dead. The rest of their body, right, circulatory, all of these things can still be living, alive, functional, working at capacity. Their brain is just gone, right?
Yeah,
If
that brain being.
doctor
Oh, sorry.
goes
Yeah.
and stops the rest of the body from functioning and intervenes in that way and kills the rest of the body, would you say that that doctor should be charged with murder?
I think that it could definitely fall under that category because I'm not entirely sure, because you're recognizing that the person is living, just that they don't have brain function, and that's what determines if a person's living or not.
So you think that should be murder?
Yeah, I think if I'm a doctor and I have somebody in either, I guess you say comatose doesn't working, but let's just say I have somebody who's brain dead. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're not alive. There's a reason why doctors aren't just shutting off all the systems in the hospital for brain dead patients, right?
That's exactly what they do. That is exactly what they do, actually.
Right. So they
Every time.
they do that, but they don't do it unprovoked. They don't do it because they feel, okay, this person is
do
not
it
alive.
Because they are brain dead. Once they're brain dead, they say, "Oh well, that person is dead."
Yeah, that would be that would be murder. You would lose your license as a doctor. You cannot do that.
Okay, so you're saying that doctors for decades have been committing mass murder every day.
That's what I'm saying with abortion.
Okay, so you're saying we should also prosecute all of these people for murder as well?
I think that if a doctor performs an abortion with recognizing that this is a living human life, then yeah, they should be prosecuted, as they have been.
Okay, so you believe that even when someone is brain dead, hospitals, doctors, and the family of those people must be required by law to keep that individual on life support forever.
That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that ending that person's.
That's what that would mean.
Well, hold on. You're jumping to conclusions.
Forever.
You're jumping to conclusions.
Because if you don't do that, then they die, and that would be murder.
That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying.
That's exactly what you're saying.
Well, can I finish what I'm saying?
Sure.
What I'm saying is a doctor coming in and shutting off a person's life support simply because, hey, this person doesn't have brain function anymore, or what we can detect is brain function, that would be murder. Okay, there's a reason why doctors don't do that. Okay?
They do. That's the thing.
Can you give me a case? Can you give me a case where a doctor was not charged?
Every single brain death case. Every single time.
Okay, let me think of one, because I feel like there's an example I can give. Because last I checked, they always consult the family, or ever heard of a power of attorney? So what would be the point of a power of attorney if there's always the chance?
When someone's brain dead, there is no. So when someone is
what is the point of? All right, go ahead.
Hold on. You have two choices when someone is brain dead. Either you unhook them from their life support and you let the rest of their body decay alongside their brain and let them die peacefully, right? Or the only other option, and you would say in your world to prevent you from murdering this person, is to indefinitely, for as long as feasibly possible, continue to keep this person on life support using all of the money that's required, like everything that goes into that, keeping this person on life support for as long as you possibly can. And if anyone were to do anything to remove that life support from that individual who is never waking up again, is never speaking to you, is never doing an action ever again, is just a body laying on a bed with a bunch of tubes in him, right? That would be murder to unhook the life support from that person at any point in time. 50 years from now, they could have been dead, but you unplug that life support and you're going to prison.
So that's not what I'm saying at all. That's you're misconstruing what I'm actually saying.
What other option is there? What other option is there?
Do you think it would be a reckless endangerment of human life if a doctor did not consult the power of attorney and just started unplugging brain dead patients?
So typically, doctors consult with the family.
Okay, so you literally said 5 minutes ago that they don't. You literally said that they don't. That's how it works. They just walk in and they unplug the person. That's exactly what you just said.
So let me finish. They usually do that as a way of helping those family members cope, to make them understand that while it looks like this individual is still living and breathing and all of these things, that person is not there anymore. They have died.
Great.
That's the only reason they ever consult them. And and usually the consultation, right, only has to do with how long it's going to take before they pull the plug. They always pull the plug eventually.
So you're saying
it's about giving the family the time to accept that. That's the only difference.
I'm not so sure that they always pull the plug, because there have been people that are at least comatose for like many years.
No, comatose is not brain death.
I understand that. I'm just saying that. I understand.
No, you can't bring it up then. There are no cases. People are not brain dead. People are not being kept on life support forever. That's not a thing that happens.
Okay, okay, sure. I'll just concede that point. Whatever. It doesn't really change anything, because what you said is that. So you conceded.
When does the death of a person happen? When does a person stop being a person?
Well, hold on, because we haven't really finished the point of the matter, which is that if a doctor, you still haven't really answered the question. If a doctor walks into 6 different patient rooms that are all brain dead and just unplugs them, doesn't consult the power of attorney, do you not think that is the reckless endangerment of human life?
No. If they did all the correct tests to determine that this is a brain dead person, then no, there's nothing immoral about.
Okay, so what are the quote unquote correct tests?
As like a courtesy.
Okay, so then what's the point of a power of attorney?
Okay, that's not just in cases of death, right? That's
I understand that.
All medical situations. That you invoking this power of attorney thing means nothing.
Well, we are trying to define legalistically what is murder, so that I'm using a legalistic understanding. So because you have to understand that. You have to understand that there is going to be separation as far as like these definitions. Like, sure, there's moral murder in the sense of like many people may disagree, like you, how abortion is not murder. But legalistically, I'm saying that these things still fall under murder.
Oh my God, please stop trying to make words sound bigger to make yourself sound smarter.
I promise I'm not trying to do that. Okay, sure. Legal. So do you have a response?
And again, so
maybe we should just open it up to questions.
Like you keep invoking the idea of like legality and I don't care about legality right now. We're having a moral discussion.
Okay, so like I said in my opening statement, do you think that laws don't reflect any morals at all?
I agree, but they're not one-to-one.
Well, I never said that, but you would agree that they can reflect morals.
They can, sure.
Okay, so you would say that murder is not a reflection of that, of morals.
I would define murder as the unjustified killing of a human person. Simple as that. Would you disagree with that definition?
The unjustified killing of human persons. Unjustified killing of human persons. I wouldn't necessarily agree with that because what would be the just, like, who's defining what is justified and not justified?
Well, that's when you get into the weeds of it, but murder,
Right.
the concept of murder is necessarily like the unjustified, whatever you determine to be unjustified killing would fall under murder.
So that's why I feel like my definition is a little more specific, because it's the premeditated with malice, aforethought, willful destruction of human persons or reckless disregard for human life. So it's not just a matter of what I think is justified and what I don't think is justified.
I don't think like wait, can you repeat the second part of it just so I can know the exact wording?
And you can look it up too, because it is a legalistic understanding of it, but what I have is murder legally can be defined as the premeditated with malice, aforethought, willful destruction of human persons or reckless disregard for human life.
Yeah, reckless disregard for human life, that's not murder.
Okay, so you're saying that I can have a reckless disregard for human life, like I can do whatever I want to people, and that's totally fine.
Well, I would say that, like, if I like run someone over with my car, that's
attempted murder. It's attempted murder
of human, right? Not murder.
It doesn't matter. You still tried to kill that person. It's like yeah. It's
no, that's not. Oh my god! You think attempted murder and murder are the same thing?
I think that they can be charged with the same thing. Yeah, absolutely. Did you have?
No! Oh my god!
Did you have premeditated with malice, aforethought, reckless disregard for human life? Yes, you did.
Right, you didn't murder that person. They're not dead.
Yeah, but that's not what you were planning on happening. You were planning on killing that person and murdering them.
Matter.
Well, then we shouldn't charge.
Going into the legal definitions of things. I don't give a fuck about the legal definitions of anything.
All right, so you don't care about the laws. Okay, so we're talking about mores. All right, well, sorry. Go ahead, Mr. Moderator.
I was going to say, sorry to interject. I don't know if you guys want to get into Q&As now.
I'm okay with that.
I think we're just gonna keep circling the drain with this. So I'd say we can just get into questions. Yeah.
So how do you guys want to format this? I didn't actually get anybody really tagging me.
Okay.
In the side chat.
Oh no, you're good. I think we just go by whoever, we go one by one with whoever's raising their hand. And
sure.
we'll pull them in one by one, have them ask the question, we'll answer it. They can go back and forth for a few minutes, and then bring them down and bring up the next person. I feel like that would be fine.
Yeah, actually, let's start with Moxie.
Hey, what's up? Damn, Spike. Yeah, I mean, this is George Good for the Pro-Lifer. I mean, look, I heard a bit of your view. Is it fair to say that you're endorsing some form of an essentialist view of what human nature is, such that a fetus has value, moral value, if it possesses like this intrinsic capacity for at least for a rational agency or for a rational soul, grounded in his nature of just being a human organism? Or something else?
That's a great question.
You're a Christian, right?
I am, yes. So that's why, like, I think that I was trying in my opening statement to address what is both legalistic and ecological facts, because you and I could disagree on what is morally right on if God exists or if God doesn't exist. But what it really comes down to is, can this be defined as murder? And when you actually abort a baby, when you go through the process, you're actually going against what nature has developed and it has continued to support developing. So regardless of if you think it's murder or not, or if you morally feel that obligation that it's murder, it's still going to be against nature by definition, and it may still fall into the category of murder by definition.
Wait, I suspect so. Two things. So I suspect you're endorsing some form of natural law theory, right?
Not necessarily, because my idea is that regardless.
Atomist?
No. I don't think so. I'm not super familiar with like you mean like Thomas Aquinas, like natural theology?
Yeah, I thought again if that's not
So-
the case, then
Well, no,
maybe a
so-
question I can direct you to.
Sorry,
Okay.
yeah. Well, I was just gonna say that. So I do agree that like morals are not something that come out of the Bible, right? It's something that is naturalistically we all inherently have objective morality, but that's not the point of what I'm trying to argue from. What I'm trying to argue with the ecological standpoint is that regardless if you think abortion is murder, regardless if you think it's morally wrong or not, through evolution, through natural processes, humans obviously are by nature, like nature wants them to develop, right? Like people are still having babies, people are still having children. Like the process was made for that naturalistically. So even if you want to say all these things about abortion, it's against nature. It's still against the natural way of things, not the natural law, but the natural development of species.
Yeah, but that's not. But presumably, descriptive predicates don't exhaust anything normative, right? Like, it's not really clear to me that, like, okay, like, because what I'm understanding here is there's at least some bridging principle that you're trying to say from this. So you might be saying something like, we exhaust so many descriptive predicates, like it's natural, or that it is some prediction that will be occurring given history or some sort of explanation. But then you're then saying, look, somehow that becomes normative, such that we think that there's some other underlying principle that things that go against this or act contrary to this would be impermissive. Yet I just don't have that sort of either intuitions or think it's plausible. I think that's up to debate currently. Right now, I don't think that was defended at all. So it seems like you might be changing the topic then. And I'm curious on whether or not you have a response towards views that say, look, if we don't think that law reflects morality, an obvious case would be that presumably that doesn't really follow necessarily, like that, like if cheating is wrong, or not cheating, if lying is wrong, then there is some legal prohibition against lying, right? And if that's true, well, then those would be some things within that set that are not included that shows that they reflect morality, and so that will weaken your claim. But then you also make the claim saying, you try to make it weaker, saying, can they reflect it? Well, then that's not really the dispute. I mean, they can or cannot. The more interesting and stronger position is whether or not does it entail, right, necessarily, like the immoral proposition is true would entail legal legal proposition being true, and I don't think that's true. I think those are obvious defeaters against that.
So you're saying if it's a legal proposition, that doesn't necessarily mean it's a moral proposition?
Yeah, like we can conceive of a proposition like let's deal with the moral one first. Like we can conceive the proposition that like lying is wrong, or that we have general reasons overall that's not costly to not lie, right? And so that wouldn't be at least a legal prohibition, or a legal permissibility in stopping people who are lying or something, right?
Right. So I agree
that
with
would be the
you.
example that I think.
Oh, sorry. Yep.
Yeah, that's a bit. I'm explaining like why. Well, if these are counterexamples, how do you even support your view that we're trying to do?
So I would agree with you. I wouldn't sit here and say like the entirety of like United States law encompasses all of morals, right? Because I would believe that it's morally wrong to cheat on your significant other, but that's not a law that's written into place, right? But in the same sense, you would agree that stealing, murder, and reckless driving are all moral issues. Well, there's laws against those. So that's kind of my point. My point of bringing up the ecological point is that regardless of how you feel about, I'm not trying to like get it off topic, but regardless of how you feel about morals, regardless of how you feel about law, it seems that in nature, human development is something that is at least for nature. That is at least something that is, I'm not going to say good or bad, but yeah.
I think that the dispute wasn't that.
Okay.
Look, I think Tranchi's point wasn't like dismissing it. Like presumably, if it's in fact true that that's just what will happen, or that's what we expect to happen, Well, no one disagrees with that. That's not interesting. The disagreement, hinders on whether or not it is murder, and when people understand murder to be is just some type of prohibition against killing, right? And so if the things that you're sort of citing here is not doing that or does not necessarily entail that, well, then you change the topic. You're not really addressing the thing in contention here, which you did skull trashing on earlier. But I find it very funny that you're not also doing the same, right? You're not saying and demonstrating why it's murder. And more like you're just hand waving it by just saying, well, look, it's just what tends to happen, or that's what people are disposed to doing. Okay, and why is it impermissive? What's the argument for that? And people want to give at least further substantive disagreements. Like people want to bring up flow. People want to bring up at least some sort of human essentialist views, and maybe other views like regarding personhoods. Like so, maybe you can endorse some animalism. And human beings, in virtue of being an organism, has continued over time, and so they have obligations to protect it, whatever. Right? And so those would be at least standard arguments that people can have in the matter. I'm not sure why disagreeing and quabbling about whether or not people tend to be more forgiving, or people tend to do X or Y and Z somehow says or answers anything about morality or about anything regarding normativity. So I think that's just an error that you've. And I just want a response as to how do you correct?
No, that's fair. I mean, if I made an error, then I'll admit that I made an error. My overall point is what I'm trying to get at is that do you believe that people exist that don't think murder is wrong necessarily, or that their criteria of what maybe like my definition of murder isn't actually what murder is? You would say people have a different view on that, right?
Well, I'm confident in saying that if we were to do a sociological study, yes, I think most people more than not would say the murder is wrong or something. But notice, it's a sociological study then, right? It's not you morally inquiring or you legally inquiring about the prohibition against the act of killing or not. That's the dispute that people are having when in the abortion debate. I don't think that people are having this dispute whether or not, hey, do people generally think that doing X or Y is permissive? Because if that's the case, then we can also cite you also polling data about people's thoughts about the moral and legal thoughts about people thinking that abortion is going to be permissible, but yet you're not going to accept that at face value saying, well, I guess I'm pro-choice now. Obviously not, right? And so that's going to be the same thing people can say against you in this debate. Okay, cool. People have judgment that murder is wrong. Don't know how that answers the question that this situation is going to be murder. I'm not going to be convinced by this. So that's sort of the thing that you have this weird double standard, and I don't know.
Yeah, well, I'm not trying to have a double standard, but my point is that different people can define what murder is, but that doesn't necessarily mean that what is happening with the baby, with an embryo, with a fetus is not murder, right? So I can have my own opinion or my own understanding of what is actually happening, but the ecological point that I'm getting at is that it just helps me to pinpoint the fact that, okay, what is actually happening right here? Just because I don't regard it in this particular way, this is the actual fact of the matter.
Yeah, that's fine. But the point here is that, presumably, if I were to cite you the things that I cited right now in the side chat, you then concede, look, I guess I'm pro-choice now because, look, it's just the case that people have some judgments about their views on just abortion in general, either morally or legally. No, obviously not, right? That wouldn't really follow, right? So if that wouldn't really follow, we can just parody that with the things that you're saying, and that wouldn't also follow. So that's the thing that I'm just a little bit scratching my head over, right?
So yeah, okay, would you say?
I agree with this? I don't know how that entails anything about being pro-choice or being pro-life and supports that.
Okay, I mean, yeah, I totally understand. I think I understand what you're saying. I think you're still kind of missing the point of what I'm trying to get at. So if I walk outside and I start telling everybody, hey, the sky's purple, and everybody actually believes me and says, okay, yeah, the sky is purple, even if every single person on the face of this planet says the sky is purple, and in mass everybody agrees the sky is purple, does that actually mean in fact the sky is purple?
Wait, but you're confusing Diri and the dicto judgment.
So yeah, it's a yes or no question.
Well, no, I'm explaining you,
okay,
right, effectively the mistake that you just made by that question alone, right? So you're conflating the dicto and the re judgment. So it is true that the re judgment reflects their stances and their judgment. And so that remains true regardless of what anyone believes. For example, I can have the belief that I am Moxie. It's just a belief that I hold. No one else can change my mind in the matter because it's made true by a particular fact. In this case, me having the mental state. And now there's another proposition, right? There's a detective judgment. Now that proposition refers to then is, look, we can have a belief about P. P denotes to a proposition, and that proposition can be made true of something else, not in virtue of my belief. So, for example, I can believe that the sky is blue. It's true that I have that belief, but it's also true that the sky is blue in virtue of the fact that there's blueness attributed to the sky, right? So I am not really sure what the disagreement here is. If you're just saying, look, people can have judgments about a particular proposition, okay, but if you're then saying, look, but no, the proposition that they're having judgments about, I want to know whether it's true or not. But then you're now just engaging back into morality, and so
Okay, so
then,
so do you believe
the
objective
moral
truth
arguments
exists?
will be then giving moral arguments will be sufficient enough, but you haven't done that. So now I'm questioning like why you even rose to me saying, well, look, you're conflating between two judgments. I agree. I just didn't think that you're fulfilling in that. But now you ask me about my views on truth. Yeah, I just hold to correspondency or truth. I don't think that's a bad view at all. And so I don't know.
Well, that's fine, but do you think objective
how
truth
you
universally exists?
I don't know about the universal part, but I think that objective truths by definition would be true in virtue of
Okay.
anyone's stances. Yes.
Okay, so that's why I'm kind of not sure. So either the sky is blue or it's not, right? So either a fetus is alive or
Yes,
it's
the
not
sky-
alive.
Notice. Oh, look. The predicate is alive. Is that a normative predicate or descriptive predicate? Because people who are pro-choice can just accept either or, depending on the way that they maintain them being pro-choice. So they can say, look, it is a descriptive predicate. It's alive, and that means that they could be explained in terms of just like, look, they're alive in the biological sense, right? And so maybe we can talk about the separate characteristics.
So that's what I'm talking about is biologically, what do the facts show? Is the fetus alive or is it
I
not?
hate to interject.
Yeah.
Just real quick. Sorry.
Okay.
I'll give you a couple more minutes, then we gotta pull somebody
Yeah,
else up.
let's finish. Sorry. I don't
how
wanna-
about you guys?
yeah.
You guys each give like your final thoughts on this, and then we're gonna move on to the next person.
Yeah, so basically, look, given, and I'm happy to talk to you outside of this sort of space.
Yeah, definitely.
I take it that like when you were arguing with Trishy, it seemed that like there was inspiration towards progressing the conversation to something that would actually talk about the status of the permissibility of abortions. But then it seemed that it devolved to talking about descriptive stuff. So I suspect that like I don't think you accomplished that. I agree that your idea was to show that like maybe people or it's true things that it's hard to deny. There are certain descriptive facts about the world, but I don't. But then they got to get to the problem, the Isop problem, right? Because at that point, it's like, okay, well then I'm not sure. I mean, we can agree with all the descriptive facts. I just don't see how that entails a normative conclusion. So again, I don't think you're fulfilling your role in reporting the abortion is going to be impermissive or not permissive. So that's the point. I think that you fell on that. But look, maybe I can give.
Well, either I did do it or I didn't do it. But whether or not you think I did or didn't is just
Final
your opinion.
thoughts.
That was my final thought. I'm saying that whether or not I actually solved the issue of is abortion murder or not is just your opinion, but whether or not I actually did it or not could be true or false. Anyways, same thing applies.
So I'm gonna bring up.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I'm gonna bring up E. And then Speedster,
Cool.
and then ZL, and then Ash. So I'm gonna cut this down to 5 minutes per person, just to
Fair.
kind of streamline this a bit.
Thank you.
Hello, world.
Hey.
What's up? Love you, Trash. You did great today. I appreciate the conversation with you guys. But my questions, I'm sorry, Trashy, you're gonna have to just listen again.
That is
I
fine
know.
by me.
My questions are gonna be almost entirely for official.
Okay.
So do you okay. So first off, on the question of murder, just for clarification, because when we're talking about the topic of abortion, legality is almost entirely out the window. What we really want to know is, like, was it a bad thing, right? Is me killing you a bad thing? I think if the law said it was a good thing, I don't think you would care. You would still say it's a bad thing. So the legal question's out the window. It's a philosophical question. When we define murder as like the unjust killing of X or a being, the reason why it's unjust is because, say your definition is true, the premeditated murder, reckless abandonment of reason, all that stuff, you can have a philosophical idea where all those things are just, and that's not murder. Or in that system, they say murder is okay. The reason why we call something murder is to morally condemn it. Do you agree that?
Sorry, so you said the legal definition, or you were saying the legal definition of murder could be something that like we condemn?
No. I'm saying that the legal definition doesn't matter at all, because even if it was legal to engage in like premeditated murder, premeditated killing, all that, you would probably still define those things as a murder, correct?
So that's exactly why that's part of why I did bring out a legalistic definition, is because regardless of how my opponent might feel morally, it still could be legally defined as murder, thus meeting the criteria of the question, is abortion murder?
Okay, I'm gonna go to the second half of my argument, which is like even if the law said that this thing was not unjust or not illegal, apply the definition used, you would still say those things are wrong, right? Or what is murder to you?
What is murder to me?
Yeah.
I would say it's that definition I gave, the same thing that I gave, the premeditated with malice, aforethought, reckless disregard for human life, or willful destruction of human persons.
Okay, what if the law said that those things are now just, they're legal?
Right, so that's why I argued from a three-point thing to try and get the overview. I argued from a legalistic standpoint, an ecological standpoint, and a moral standpoint.
I understand, but I'm asking because you're saying you want to use a legal definition. I'm trying to tease out the reason why using the legal definition does not matter for this conversation at all. I'm asking.
Right, but for the same reason, I could say that morally. Yeah, for the same reason, I could say morally it doesn't matter, the argument that I make, because anybody's morals could be different, which is why a legalistic one is necessary. So I give three different scenarios, different cases, ecological, legalistic, and moral reasons why abortion is murder. And so my opponent has to understand that no matter if he knocks one down, there's still two others that he has to try and explain.
But the issue you're having now is that if you're going to appeal to the legal definition, your definition heavily depends on your geographical location, right? What's murder in one land won't be in another. I could create a country in which murder, as you defined, isn't actually murder. It's actually completely just, and you get a $1,000 cash prize. Like, the reason why you don't go off the legal definition is because the legality isn't necessarily moral. The reason why we call abortion bad, the reason why people appeal to the Bible for abortion not being allowed, is because they're trying to make a moral claim. They're trying to claim that this thing is wrong according to some abstract concept of morality.
So you think
the legal system,
right? So your understanding of abortion being murder, like you're saying, it has to come from a moral standpoint. It can't be defended from any other standpoint. Like it has to be religious. It has to be morally grounded.
I'm saying that to have the conversation substantively, it has to be moral, because the legal question is like a question that's like a derivative of the moral question, right? The reason why we define murder as bad under the legal statutes is because we morally consider it to be bad. But if we morally consider it to be good, or it is immoral, but the state decides that it is illegal, well, then it no longer matters that that's legal. We don't care about the legality of it. We care about whether it's wrong.
Right, but that's not really related to the topic, right? The topic is abortion murder. So if I can show abortion is murder, even by legalistic definition, then abortion is murder. You see what I'm getting at? Like, I understand you want to know if it's morally wrong, but that's not something I came here to prove today. I came here to give a case for why it's morally wrong, but also legalistically and ecologically.
Okay, I understand what you're saying. It's just, I'm explaining to you why using the legal definition is wrong. It's like, it's not wrong as in like morally bad. It's ineffective. It's unimportant to the conversation. But the second half I wanted to discuss is the personhood concept. What do you think personhood is, like, in a concise manner?
That's a great question. I'm not entirely sure. Like I could try and give you a definition, but let me just look one up, because I don't exactly know off the top of my head.
Before you look it up, if you're gonna be using the position that, like, it feels weird for you to be arguing about personhood if you don't know what personhood means.
So I'm arguing for life. I'm pro life, not pro personhood.
You don't care about personhood at all.
No, I never said that, like, in a general sense, but as far as what I'm actually defending here, it's life. It's not necessarily someone's personhood.
Okay, I'll just give you a hypothetical. Hypothetically, we have a human arm, similar to what Track gave, human arm, which is connected to a mechanical machine that pumps blood through the body. And all the blood that comes through the body is fed nutrients and oxygen sufficient enough to maintain the functionality of this body. So it won't die ever, besides like the natural rate of degradation due to time and still mutations due to time and constant mutation, constant replication. I mean, besides that, like that thing would be alive forever. There's biochemical processes happening, which all serve a greater function, which is maintaining the system, which is that of the arm. What is that wrong to kill that now? By the way, everything I just said was correct. You can do that.
Is
that wrong now?
No, that's fine. So does a severed arm pump its own blood, and does it have its own antibodies? No, because it's not the same thing as an embryo or a fetus.
It's alive. It's producing antibodies.
Okay, so will you want to answer my question?
It's alive. It's producing antibodies.
Okay, so how is it producing antibodies? What is producing the antibodies in the arm?
The cells are in the arm.
Okay, I'd have to see. Like, I don't believe that, but
it's still red blood cells. It's still white.
Okay, does it produce?
We're gonna have to move on to the next person.
Okay.
I appreciate the conversation. Thank you.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. Next up is Speedster.
Yo, what's good?
Hey, what's
So
up?
yeah,
Hey, Speedster.
yeah. So thank you guys for having me up. I would just like to talk to Trashy first. So Trashy,
Of course.
yeah. So Trashy, I saw a lot of the time that you were asking him if, let's say, you kill a brain dead patient, is that going to be considered murder? You cannot murder a dead person. You see what I mean? Because if you're brain dead, then
I completely agree.
yeah, exactly. So you know what I mean. Like if you're clinically dead, you cannot be killed again. So yeah.
You know,
Exactly.
I would agree completely. The reason I brought that up is because his definition of murder would necessitate that the removal of life support from a brain dead patient would constitute the charge of murder.
I mean, not necessarily. If I can dumb it down for you, he's just saying.
Well,
that,
he agreed to that. He agreed to that statement.
Well, okay, so if he agreed to that, that's gonna be an issue. But what I assume,
Agreed.
like what I assume he was trying to do originally was that he was trying to say the intentional killing of an innocent human life is going to be murder, right? So this wouldn't be an issue had he used that definition consistently. So yeah, if I make that claim, if you bring up the brain dead patients argument, that's not going to apply because brain dead patients are already dead. You cannot murder dead people. You cannot kill dead people who are already dead. So yeah, pretty much there. Does that sound good?
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense to me. I don't know if it would to Johnny, but
yeah, sure. I'll get to Johnny now. Yeah, thank you for real. But Johnny, let me just ask you something. Is it true that you agreed to his original question before? What was the question again? Trashy?
of which one? I asked a lot.
It was like the one question that you told me about that caused an issue with his argument. You told me about it like 2 seconds ago.
About the brain dead patient?
Oh yeah, the brain dead patients. What was that question that you asked him that he agreed
Yeah,
to?
so what I asked specifically would be if someone is brain dead, where their brain is no longer functioning, and they're considered medically brain dead, but the rest of their body is still alive and functioning like normal. If someone were to pull the plug on that person, would that constitute murder?
And he agreed to that. That's going to be an issue, yeah, because the thing is, since we already asserted that a brain dead patient is already dead, then this argument is just going to be inconsistent. Because
Well, so
now
he would disagree. So you should talk to him about that.
yeah, so Johnny, the problem is that as I asserted earlier, you cannot kill or murder a brain dead patient, considering the fact that they're already dead. Do you agree with that?
So why is a brain dead person dead?
Yeah, so a brain dead person is dead because their brain has stopped working, so therefore they cannot perceive, they cannot use their brain accordingly.
So your definition of life would have to be brain activity.
No, not necessarily, but if you're clinically dead, that would just imply that you cannot.
Well, wait a second. You just said that would categorize you as dead because a person without any brain. And by the way, Trashy, for the record, did say that a brain dead person doesn't. It's not that they exhibit no brain activity because they still exhibit brain waves. They just don't exhibit, by his criterion, what is considered consciousness.
Yeah, they no longer
Yeah.
have the capacity to deploy consciousness.
Right, but so that's a completely different argument then, because then you have to define, okay, so what is this? What are the parameters you're setting for consciousness, and is there actually any facts into what is
Already
making?
defined this.
Right, you kind of did, but your criterion could be put on people that are already alive.
Yeah, so the problem is that again, since we already asserted that a lack of consciousness is going to equal some kind of clinically dead issue here, you cannot kill.
Well, I don't agree with that, but yeah.
Not murder anyone. Why not?
Okay, so like I said, in my scenario, if a doctor has 6 patients on the same floor and he walks in and he just starts unplugging them because he thinks they're all brain dead, okay, he doesn't consult power of attorney, he doesn't do any of that. Is that murder? Yes, that is murder. He's going to be arrested. He's going to lose his doctor's license, okay? It doesn't matter how you want to put it, but that is at least legalistically murder.
You understand that's not what we're arguing for, right?
Exactly. That's this.
Like, I'm sorry to butt in on your time, Speedster.
No, you're good. You're good.
Yeah, so then maybe I'm just not understanding where you're coming from.
The process is that they do the correct test to define that this.
Right. So define what are the correct tests. What are the correct tests? You've yet to define what is a correct test. What is okay? Okay. Well, then don't
need to know the specifics.
Well, I need to know them.
I will.
Then quote a doctor.
We're gonna move on to the next person. All right.
Thank you for your.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
The next one's gonna be Ash. He had his hand up way before.
Okay. It must have been something that I clicked off from before. All right.
No, you're fine. Oh, Ash, you gotta accept it. You gotta keep it on. You want to go after? Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, that works. Time for the fun to really begin. Come on now, don't be shy.
Welcome up.
Hey, Unreal. Good seeing you.
Hello. Like, yeah. So I have 2 questions. If you can handle it, Trashy, can you do that?
I think so.
Awesome. First question, if you could answer it, the first question that I had put in the side chat, because I wasn't here for the entirety of this debate. So if you could answer the question, that'd be great.
I define the beginning of personhood to be at some point between 20 and 24 weeks. It is defined this way because it is within that time period where fetuses first develop the capacity to deploy consciousness. And I believe it is that factor which determines personhood.
Okay. All right. So second question, I just want to engage with the prompt: is abortion murder? So, what do you? I'm gonna read a definition and maybe we see if we can agree with it, because I think that's best to start out with something that we agree with. I consider murder the unlawful, premeditated killing of one human being by another. Would you agree to that?
No, I wouldn't put unlawful in the definition. Are we talking legal or moral definitions?
I'm just talking about the definition of murder.
Legally or morally? These are 2 different standards.
Really? What is the difference?
What? So something can be legal but still be considered immoral.
Yeah, I'm
or vice
aware of that.
versa.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. So these are not one and the same. So are we talking morally or legally? Because laws can change.
You know what? How about this? Why don't you tell me? I'm aware of that. Do you not agree with the definition though, or is it just that one word that you have a problem with?
So my definition of murder, very fundamental, basic understanding, is that murder is the unjustified killing of a person. Simple as that.
Okay, how about this? The premeditated killing of one human being by another.
Well, unjust has to be in there somewhere.
Yeah.
Like a wrongful killing.
The
the
premeditated
killing of Osama bin Laden. The killing of Osama bin Laden was very premeditated, but we wouldn't say that the SEALs that killed him should be charged and put in prison for murder because it wasn't an unjust killing.
Okay. The premeditated, justified kill. Wait, the premeditated, unjustified killing of one human being by another.
Yeah, I would say persons.
Why do you want to say persons, not human being?
Because a corpse is a human being by the biological definition, but it's not a person.
Okay, but we understand we can't kill a corpse, right? So let's not
Because it's not a
work
person.
our way around that. Okay.
Right, but so like someone who's in a coma permanently, right? The doctor waves his magic wand over the patient, and the magic wand tells him that this person's never going to wake up again, right? I would say that's no longer a person worth any moral consideration, right? It's still a human being that's alive, but it's not a person. There's no one really left to speak of there. So you can kill that just fine and it not be murder.
Okay. I don't agree with that. Yeah.
You don't think that we
I don't
should
think
be allowed to pull
you
the
might have to
plug
pull me
on
down, actually.
someone?
This is not going to get anywhere.
That kind of is what happens when you come
I'm sorry?
unprepared. I'm sorry to hear that, man.
No, I
You
don't
have a good one,
agree.
though.
I don't agree. I don't agree with your semantic. I don't agree with your deliberate use of this
I
definition.
know it's hard to be
You're
nuanced. I know
deliberately
it's
removing
tough.
word. No. You're deliberately removing words to try to fit your narrative when you know that it's not even what it
I'm
means.
just trying to have a
You
concise
are
definition, my friend.
deliberately taking out the word. You're deliberately taking out the definitions, right? And from this definition, human, and you're putting persons, right? Because you know that it aligns with your view, all right? Because you know that if you leave
Humans
the
and
word
persons are
humans,
different
you're in a
things.
trap.
Human is a biological term. Person is philosophical.
Are we not talking about biology when it comes to abortion?
No, this is a philosophical discussion.
That's not. Actually, I don't agree. Sorry, I was just going to say real quick. I actually don't agree that it's just strictly a philosophical discussion because, like I said, I gave three.
Well, a lot of it is based upon biological facts, which help us determine our
Right.
philosophical.
So you're saying life can't be determined biologically?
When did I say that? I said that the disagreement itself is on the moral level, not the facts of reality.
Well, we seem to disagree about the facts of reality.
All right, I think we should move on to the next person.
Also, can we make this the last question? And no offense, and I apologize if we aren't ready to wrap up. I just got to go help my wife real quick.
No, you're totally fine.
I appreciate it, though.
This is the last person anyway.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. And to anyone,
Hello.
sorry, before Ash starts, to anyone still listening, I'm going to start my own VC once this stage is dropped. If anyone wants to come on in and continue the discussion and everything, I love to have a little after show.
So
Yeah, go ahead, Ash.
I have a question for both debaters. Is abortion murder?
I would say if it's before the 20-week mark of pregnancy, absolutely not.
I'm
You
just
can
kidding,
do
but
whatever
I just
you
have a
want
question for Johnny.
to that fetus.
So Johnny, why do you think the ecological argument is relevant to us? My understanding for your ecological argument is that like killing or the abortion goes against like the human, like the natural way of things for humans, and I don't see how it's relevant to most people because most people, most secular people, generally derive their morality from like utilitarianism as opposed to naturalism, and it seems like your ecological argument is just it just assumes that everyone follows a naturalistic moral view.
Yeah, so not to say that you're wrong necessarily, but my implication with the ecological argument was to separate it from the moral and the legalistic argument. So when I say that, I'm not saying that the ecological implications have moral implications, but you just can't be pro choice and be pro nature, right? Because nature obviously wants humanity to thrive and to develop, and human development is a part of evolutionary nature. So it's regardless of how you feel. My point is that I have 3 different working definitions, and it's regardless of how you feel about either of these definitions that abortion can still be considered murder under these criterion. Because like my opponent would agree that there is a legalistic definition of murder or life, and there is a moral definition of murder and life.
Well, I don't see what being pro-nature means exactly, because it's not a position that most people hold. It's not a position that really amounts to much. Like, there aren't people walking around saying they're pro-nature.
No, people don't say that, but what I mean by that, it's just a term that I'm using to say that, like, so say global warming. Would you say that like you're for global warming or against it?
Well, I'm against global warming, but
okay,
the point is,
then you should be against abortion, because the idea, yeah.
And that is,
I'm so sorry, Ash. I know this is your questioning period. I really need to ask Johnny a question on this topic.
Sure.
Do you think someone should be charged with some sort of crime for jerking off?
Sperm's not alive, so no.
Ooh, yes, it is. Yes, it is absolutely alive, definitionally.
Like what definition?
And also,
what definition?
It falls under your category of like.
So if I put a sperm. So if I put a sperm in an artificial womb, it will grow to full term and become a person?
It doesn't need to grow into a person for it to be considered alive, right? Like bacteria.
To be considered a human life. Okay, well, if you want to go back, that's why I'm trying to ask, what is your definition? Because yes, in the sense it's alive, like a cell is alive, then yes, but is it a human life? Is it a human life?
I'm not talking about it being alive even, but it still falls under your definition of completely going like to masturbate, to give yourself to finish and ejaculate without it being in a woman trying to reproduce. That is inherently against the natural way we were supposed to do things. So that should be illegal.
That's completely conflating my argument. That's conflating my. Well, hold on. Let me address.
Becomes possible. And
so
go ahead.
I think Trashy's just having a hard time understanding what I'm saying is that I'm specifically talking about the development of human life within nature. So you would say that the development of human life is not natural.
Sorry?
Trashy, you would say that the development of human life is not a naturally occurring process.
Well, I mean, like, that's getting into so many, like, what do you mean by?
Well, that's my whole argument. It is, so if left alone, okay, as we know from evolution, natural selection, genetic drift, whatever you want to add to that, will human life develop?
No, not if nothing happens, no.
So you're saying random chance is false. There's no such thing as evolution.
No. Things still have to do right, like if you leave it up to
that's not how evolution
its
works.
Natural thing, right? If a mother doesn't eat, that baby's not going to live.
That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that what is evolution then? Okay, is it natural selection and random chance, more or less, like very simplistic? But is that kind of what the big factors in evolution, right?
Kind of, yeah.
I think we're
okay. So
topics can I just bring conversation back to what we're talking about?
I don't think we're off topic. I just don't think Trashy is understanding my ecological argument.
Evolution.
I guess not.
Like. Yeah, when people say they're against global warming, they're not ascribing. They don't value, they don't
value the globe,
environment.
They don't value the really.
Really, they just don't value it. It's not about the earth. It's not about trees on their own, but it's about the human life, the animal life, and the conscious life that would be affected by global warming.
So I have some friends who are pro-choice and are very much for abortion that are definitely not for or against global warming for the fact that it's because it's going to save human lives. They're for it because of the environment or they're against it rather.
Well, I don't know about them, but yeah, most people just ascribe they're against global warming because they ascribe value to conscious
Sure. Like
life,
people can have their
and
different
the
motivations.
global warming will affect
Okay, so
human
but
life.
but you see,
animal
my
life,
point is that
and
different people can have
human lives,
different
and
different
so
moral
much.
obligations. That doesn't change the fact of what is biologically happening and developing.
What do you mean?
So like you said different people can have different moral reasons for why they're against global warming, but that doesn't change actually what is biologically happening and what is happening within nature.
Yeah, well, is sperm like human life? In a way, it is. It's a cell. It comes from humans. All your cells are human life in a way, but you don't ascribe value to them because they're not conscious. Fetuses are also not conscious, or
How not?
at least we think they don't. They aren't.
Okay, so keyword being
unless,
at least we think they don't. So what do
we
the
don't-
facts say?
We don't fully understand the process of consciousness.
So
but
you're
as
saying that we don't fully understand, therefore
it's in the brain.
we should have the right to
And,
murder a child
yeah,
because we don't fully
and,
understand.
We don't fully understand
Okay.
the process of consciousness, but as far as we understand, it's related to brain activity and neuronal activity, and a proper like neuronal activity in the fetus starts around like 30 weeks. Rudimentary memory, sensory reactions, sensory processing begins in the fetus around 30 weeks, and it seems like it's around the time where a fetus develops the capability of consciousness, and before that, it's essentially a bunch of human cells, just in the same way that your hand cells is also part of you, but it's not conscious on its own.
Yeah, I simply disagree. I mean, we've kind of already touched on those topics. Like if you sever an arm, it definitely is not representative of an embryo, a human embryo.
Well, it's cells. It's human cells, and it's alive. Biologically, it's alive, but it does not possess consciousness. It does not have the capability to have consciousness.
But you would agree an abortion
different.
would be ending
Different,
life
yeah.
still.
In a way, it's ending life, just like burning your hand would be.
But
it's
ending
different.
life wouldn't. Ending life wouldn't be
agree with you,
murder.
it's different
Ending
and
human
has
life
more
wouldn't be
value to
murder.
it.
It wouldn't be murder. Ending human life.
What do you mean?
Well, you just said that
Hold on, just
yeah.
let me speak for a second. Like human cells are like your hand is still different from a fetus in certain ways. I'm giving you
Right.
that. Like fetuses still have the capability of possessing consciousness, and obviously, if you kill a woman and when she's pregnant and the fetus is like before 20. Hasn't gone to 20 weeks yet. It's still really bad, and yeah, I think you ascribe more value to her life and the fetus, by like virtue of it possibly possessing consciousness, possibly being turning into a baby. But I still think abortion is necessary. Abortion rights are necessary because they maximize human happiness in the long run.
So whether or not abortion rights are necessary isn't really the topic.
Like that.
Yeah. So whether or not it's necessary isn't really the point of the topic. The point of the topic is it murder, right? So it sounds like you kind of do agree that it is murder, or at least it's a really bad thing, is what you said. But yeah.
It made it like you might get the impression that I think like a fetus before like 20 weeks before it has like proper neuronal activity is essentially the same thing as like your hand or any other cell from your body. And no, I think it's different, but I still think it should be allowed. I don't think it's the conscious human life yet. So abortion in that case wouldn't exactly be murder, but it's a different thing from like cutting your hand off. There's more moral weight to it.
Okay, I guess I'm just. We can probably just leave it at that, but I guess I'm just confused as to where your boundaries are. Like same thing with trashy. It just doesn't seem to have clear boundaries as to why it's different or why it's not murder or it is really bad but still not murder.
Well, we believe because they don't possess consciousness, they don't have the capability, or they don't have like the neurons for consciousness yet.
Yeah. So can you
that's
define
why
exactly?
they're not.
So at
persons yet.
12 weeks, they do have the neurons they have all their body parts are fully developed. Like that's kind of what we were talking about earlier. So like, so what do you mean exactly by that?
Yeah, around 12 weeks, I think a bunch of neurons do begin to develop, but like.
Well, they're fully developed at that point, at least according to Dr. Jerome Lejeune.
Begins
No, you
to
can't call,
develop around 20
anything
weeks.
at 12 weeks fully developed because you're not fully developed.
So, well, sure, sir. Sorry, fully developed may not be like the proper term, but what I really said was all body organs are functional.
Right, functional doesn't mean
Yeah.
that it's developed. You know what?
Well, that's fine. No, I misspoke. We don't have to rehash it. I'm just saying that what I meant was that all body organs are functional, so all the neurons are functional.
Yeah, neurons do develop around like 12 weeks, but around 20-week mark is where like sensory perception and memories begin to form, like rudimentary memories begin to form in fetuses, and that's around the time. Actually, it's
Right, but
around
you
30
admitted
weeks that
you
rudimentary
admitted that we
memories
could be
and sensory
wrong,
perception
that it could go
begin
back
to
further.
develop.
That
It probably doesn't go back further.
okay. So what do you base that on?
What do you mean?
Well, because like I said, at 12 weeks, all body organs are fully functional. So what do you mean?
Well, they like neurons do begin to develop like early on, but what I'm saying is that sensory perception, rudimentary memory, begin to develop around 30 to 40 weeks.
So is that your criterion for what is alive?
I think it points to the development of consciousness.
Okay, so consciousness then. Yeah, let's just wrap. I mean, I'm still confused. Like, there's still boundaries that it seems like you're kind of like maneuvering around, but you're not actually setting.
What do you mean? Like, my point is like fetuses in early development, like 1 to 6 weeks, 1 to 10 weeks, and stuff like that.
So my point is that like what you're saying is kind of circular. You're saying that the neurons have to. Yeah, sorry to cut you off. So you're saying that neurons are firing. You're saying it's a.
And they're definitely let me speak for me.
You're saying that
they're a baby in development, but they still don't possess consciousness.
Yeah.
I think you can ascribe more value to them than like the rest of your cell. Like you ascribe more value to a fetus in early development than say your hand.
So
while they're both human cells, but you ascribe more value to the fetus even before it develops like brain activity and stuff like that.
Okay.
And
I can't get a word in.
The building blocks of consciousness. So
all right, we're gonna wrap this.
Yeah, let's just wrap it up because he's not letting me talk.
All right. Well, thank you guys for the debate.
Thank you guys so much.
I don't know if I have any conclusions.
Yeah, thank you, man. I really appreciate this.